Hi there, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for today's session with John Leary Joyce. Today we have a fantastic session planned for you. John has been a passionate executive coach for 15 years who founded the Academy of Executive Coaching in the UK in 1999. And he's built it up to be one of the strongest brands in executive coach training in Europe, if not the most strongest. His success is down to having great coaches to help him stay focused, but also significant mentors who have given him timely advice and guidance to avoid pitfalls and traps that are the stuff of business life. He is the current UK president for the EMCC, which is the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, hence his newfound interest in the value and power of professional mentoring, his subject for this webinar. Thank you so much, John. I'll now hand it over to yourself.
Thanks very much, Ben. Great to be here again this year to take part in this wonderful feast of knowledge and experience. As you can see, I have a very strong executive coaching background, some 15 years and best part of 12 years running an executive coach training program. So it's kind of interesting that I'm coming round to looking at mentoring and seeing what mentoring has to offer. And that's partly because I've taken up the presidency of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council and really taking another look at what mentoring has to offer. Now, mentor, you know, where it comes from, Greek mythology. Mentor was a good friend of Odysseus, and his job was to look after Telemachus, to give him advice and develop him into the role of leader. And of course, he's given his name as the faithful and wise advisor. Now, a huge amount of work has been going on in education, communities, public service bodies, as well as small and multinational corporations around the provision of that faithful and wise advice from experienced leaders to inexperienced personnel. And as Ben said about me, you know, I run a very successful business, and that's because I've had significant mentors to really guide me and help me kind of step on and see the next bit that I couldn't actually see for myself, and help me avoid certain things. Haven't always taken their advice to my detriment, but there you go. That's what learning's all about. But I have a very special focus for this particular webinar. It's not about mentoring in general, but it's about looking at the overlap between executive coaching and mentoring. My proposition is that we have to pay attention to the difference. And really, maybe we've got to come back and start looking at mentoring to give our clients a better value for what they need. So this is a taster event. I hope you'll enjoy the tasty morsels that I'm going to offer, and in preparation for the full webinar on the 22nd of June. And what I'll be covering now and then, I'm going to call something I've created called the advice quotient in coaching. So let's have a look. The advice quotient. And get a slight snag. Aha, there we go. The advice quotient. It's the amount of advice or guidance a coach will offer within a coaching session before they really change into a mentor. All our competency frameworks and definitions around coaching indicate that it's about helping clients to discover and follow their own advice. We know this, by creating their own solution. But we also know, especially kind of led down from sports coaching, which is one of the roots of personal and business coaching, that there's an awful lot of experience that the coaches bring, that they will offer and provide direction and guidance to a certain degree. So we know when we're in our coaching sessions, especially if you come from a consulting background where you're used to giving advice, that it's so tempting to use that magic spell, you know, save them money, save them time, give them all they want to know. A real temptation. And how do we manage that? Well, this is the subject for this webinar and the full webinar later on in June. And what I want to cover with you in this short session is what is the evidence for this AQ, advice quotient proposition, that I'm putting forward? What's the dilemmas that you experience as an executive coach when you have got expertise that you want to share? How do you do that? Under what basis? What guise do you use? What do you call it when you're giving this expert advice? We'll talk about that. We look at the competency base of a professional mentor. What is that now? European Mentoring Coaching Council have laid down the competency framework for mentoring. So I'll talk to you about that. And then something I've created here is the 6-level AQ spectrum, from mentoring, from coaching through mentoring to trusted advisor. And we'll drill down into the so what. What is the value? Why would you want to contract as a mentor? Why would you want to be upfront and, as I've said at the beginning, come out of the closet as a mentor rather than as an executive coach? And then, what is the responsibility of a mentor? How is that different from being a coach? And what might be the value in you calling yourself a mentor? So, the reality. The evidence for this AQ proposition. What we know, and from 15 years of experience, I've come up against this over and over again. I've seen the research statistics and the evidence of why coaches get hired. Sadly, they do not get hired on the whole for their coaching capability, but on their professional background. This is generally in order to fit in with the client's professional position. Also, if you've got a track record in that particular area, you're likely to get hired. So a coach with an engineering background is far more likely to get hired by a construction company than one with an IT background. Coach with an accounting background will be hired for an FD more than one that somebody from a marketing background, for instance. Coach who's been a CEO of a major company, clearly going to be more likely to be hired by another CEO than an organizational psychologist, despite their competence as an executive coach. Over and over, I've seen associate credential coach level, so that's sort of basic quality coaches, being hired over an MCC level, master's level coach, because of their career background. So why is this? Well, one is the market doesn't know what to look for in a really good coach. We haven't educated them enough to understand the professional skills of an executive coach. And that will take time. They understand that a coach has got specific competencies, but they want something more. Now, it is some merit that a coach with a professional background can ask more searching questions and be more effective in understanding what the coachee is looking for. And professional bodies like the ICF and the MCC are working hard to change the perception that the professional background of the coach is more important. But it will take time, and it will take much greater clarity about what a coach has to offer specifically. But more importantly, there's this whole issue of the AQ, the advice quotient. This webinar, for example, it's 100% AQ. You're here to listen to my advice. I'm here, and these webinars are here to give you the information. It's not a coaching exchange. I'm not here to ask you, engage with you. And one of the things I've found, sorry, I forgot to say, was that if you want to ask questions, you can please type them in on the comments at the right here. So I'm talking about the 100% advice quotient that's happening here on this webinar. And this is what a lot of clients are looking for. They want not only the coach, but they want their career background, their experience from what they've done before and what they can bring to that. They want an expert opinion on one level. And they need to believe that the coach understands their business, their sector, their role. I have spoken to so many heads of coaching in organizations, and they always say what they're looking for is coaches that are a good fit with their organization. Now, an awful lot of the time, this is code for someone with previous experience in the sector or role. So, what are executives really looking for? Are they actually looking for mentors? Are they looking for someone that can give them that level of advice and opinion? So if you're not calling yourself a mentor, what dilemmas does that face for you? How and when do you utilize that experience, that knowledge that you have? And in the main webinar in June, I'll talk about this in a lot more depth. But just to clarify that this is especially problematic for those who have had a long time career as a consultant and are used to giving advice. If you think about it, if you think of a coaching situation where you've been asked and a question, what do you think about this? What do you think about this strategic plan that I've put in place? And you've been there, you've done it before, and you're tempted to give your opinion. What do you call it? I know from lots and lots of supervision and training sessions that coaches have their own way of getting around the competency requirements that are solely about getting the client to come up with the answer. I had one very experienced coach that used to say, "This is my tips for gardeners." Yeah, rather odd, isn't it? Tips for gardeners. But that was his way of changing the sort of the mode at which they were functioning and letting them know, actually, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice here. And somebody said they call it their Hitchhiker's Guide, as in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So this was their way of signaling that they wanted to do something else other than coaching. And maybe most of you might use, I'm just putting on my consultant's hat at the moment, or my advisor's hat. These odd labels are important to distinguish the change of role, because that's what's happening. You're changing from being a coach that's helping the person draw out their own knowledge and wisdom, and you're offering something. You're offering your expert opinion, not just a suggestion of possibilities, but actually clearly, I've been here, I've done it before. So I would be really interesting if you actually wouldn't mind sending through, if you recognize this. I'd love to build up a little bit of an inventory of different labels that you would use in this. So if you wouldn't mind typing them in here, what do you say? What's your label in order to give yourself permission to give a little bit of advice? I know we're not telling anybody else. This is anonymous, so just slip it in here so that I can build up more information about it, because it happens. And I know that I do it myself, and I've supervised so many, and I've trained people, and I know this is what goes on. So let's not pretend it doesn't happen. Let's take a step forward then and have a look at what is a mentor, because part of the problem with calling ourselves a mentor. I've just seen Ben here. He's putting on his consulting hat now. Sorry, I've been slightly distracted by the questions from Ben here. So the problem is that mentoring has, lost some credibility, because basically it's about just telling the junior how they should do it a better way, the way you've done it before. And that's rather kind of simple structure, and really it's just a telling, and in a way kind of overwhelming the other person in its worst form. It's rather interesting that AMCC, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, they have indicated the competence base for a professional mentor is the same as a coach. They're saying it's the same. There is no difference between an accredited mentor and an accredited coach. Now that's really interesting. Because I'm in the president's role at the moment, we're going back to relook at that, because in actual fact, I think as we really understand the value of mentoring, I think we're going to have to change it, and I'll explain what I'm talking about in a second. What we have to do is reverse the stigma of a coach to it being someone who's underskilled, between someone that is actually knows the job, knows the experience, has experience of the role, but is able to use coaching skills. So my proposition is that a mentor is an executive coach plus the experience when we get to this level of professional mentoring. And then, of course, we're sitting at this fine boundary about when and how do we help the coachee find the answers themselves? Because really, it's not so good to be constantly reinventing the wheel. We know that all the time. You have something to offer. You've been probably in a career for 20 years and you have something to offer. So when do you give advice and when do you pass it on? Now, I want to do a little bit of a drip feed here, because when do you move from mentoring to coaching? I want to introduce the 6-level AQ spectrum, pure coach to trusted advisor. And this is really the core of what I'll be doing on the long webinar. I'll be taking you through these 6 steps and helping you identify where do you sit. I'll be doing this through a coaching client. I'll be coaching them through the 6 different steps, so you can see where you're moving from non-directive, pure coaching, no instruction, through sharing some of your reaction and experience, moving more towards the mentoring about suggesting various possibilities and options, to being more specific about the options and guidance available, getting more specific about in guidance, till finally you're giving direction. You're actually telling someone where they should be going. And we're getting down to the pure advisor. And we know that a lot of chief executives, they say, what I really want is a trusted advisor, someone that will give them some answer and some guidance. And I know that I have needed that as a CEO myself. So it's about coming out of the closet. Hey, there's something important here. It's about contracting. We need to be clear what it is we're doing. What are the advantages of being a mentor with your client? Talking about what you know and giving some of your advice. Until we get more, much clearer international definitions of coach or mentor advisor, what's most important is that you are clear with what you're offering. And you do not say that you're an accredited coach with ICF or whatever professional body if you are going to give specific advice. The issue is, of course, if you make a mistake and offer advice that proves to be actually not so good and rather disastrous, then I'm afraid your professional body will not stand by you, and they shouldn't. because actually you are moving away from the definition of coaching as laid down by ICF. So it's really important that we do think as coaches about where we give our advice. Now, oh yes, and yeah, the one thing, of course, I've got here is something about looking again at professional liability. You know, the professional liability insurance for coaching is very low, and there's a reason for that. Is because we are not held responsible for the outcome. And if we are going to move more into a mentoring capacity, we might discover that there is some responsibility here. Because as a coach, as a mentor, we have really a duty of care to the client and their organization. You know, it's all very well at one point to say, you know, this is my suggestion, this is my advice, this is what I suggest you can do. But as I said earlier, what happens actually if your advice doesn't prove to be accurate and there's a rather bit of a disaster that happens? So the mentor has another level of responsibility over the coach. So clearly, we know that a coach is mobilizing the coachee to find the or has no responsibility for the final outcome other than the process of getting there, but that's different for a mentor. So important to be clear. Now I'm just drawing to a close here. What we've covered here, and we'll expand on the full webinar again, is we've covered really the evidence for this AQ proposition about advice. We'll cover more about the dilemmas and what executive coaching need to do in the way they use their expertise. We look more closely at the competence space for a professional mentor. I'll go in some depth, moving at the 6-level spectrum from pure coach to trusted advisor. We'll spend more time looking at the contracting process for a mentor and the duty of care to the organization. So thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope that's given you a real taste, some tasty morsels that you'll be able to take away for you to think about, and look forward to hearing hearing from you, yes, because I'd really like to hear those labels that you give yourself, but you joining me on June the 22nd, Friday the 22nd, 12 o'clock US, 5 o'clock UK. Lovely. Thank you very much, Ben. I think there might be more questions. I think I've got a question here. Could I show the 5 levels again? There we go.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has got any questions, John, are you able to hang around for 5 or 6 minutes just to answer a few questions?
Yep.
Okay, so if anyone's got any questions, please put them through on the question box on the right-hand side in your control panel, and I will filter those through to John, so please put them through there. Okay, so there's a question here. John talked about ICF guidelines, but does he see the same issue if member of EMCC, which promotes both mentoring and coaching?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm afraid I can't actually give you a clear answer on that, because at the moment there is the overlap, and they're saying the competencies are the same. So I think if you're accredited with EMCC, then you would carry both. But what I would like to see going forward is that there is a differentiation, and that you become accredited as a mentor, which requires you to demonstrate your coaching capability and the area of expertise. So I can do a very good mentoring session around helping someone set up their own coaching business, because I understand that inside out and I have a lot of experience of it, but I would not be a good mentor on someone understanding their financial position, because although I understand some of it, I'm clearly not an expert in that field. So I think there needs to be a revision of this process.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that, John. I've got quite a few more questions. Is it possible to show again the first 2 slides, John? Can you, if you get a chance while answering the next 2 questions, if you put through those first 2 slides, that'd be awesome.
No, you don't want the cartoon, do you?
Okay.
Is it this one? Educating the market in AQ? Is that the slide?
Quite possibly. There's not got any details of which slide. It just says, could you put up there? John, what is the meaning of AQ?
Oh, well, it's something I've just created myself. This is not. It's the amount of advice. So in my little cartoon, this one, it's the amount of advice you give, because you know it's so much easier to give advice. We think we can save time. Think we can save money if we just give people what they want to know. That's my little sort of magic spell here that I'm talking about. And it seems in the short term that it's easier to slip in the advice. What we know is that it's not the best learning medium. So these sessions that we're doing now are fantastic, but I am not getting to understand you. I'm not getting to understand where your perspective is. So we're not coaching, and there is actually a significant difference. So what I'm saying is that it's the amount of advice that you give, and that will tip you over from being a coach into a mentor, and then ultimately into a trusted advisor. But it's my own. I've just made that up for the sake of this presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for that, John. You just got to make sure you
Here?
reference yourself when you use this, John. If you're gonna use yourself. Okay, so I've got quite a long comment here. It is confusing with people who are trained in consulting and are mentoring, but call themselves a coach. Then the executives have different expectations of what a coach does. How do you suggest separating our helping to reshape understanding of a coach to executives who have experienced otherwise?
This is the key problem that we have in the field at the moment, and because mentoring is a poor relation, it's much sexier to call yourself a coach than a mentor, and I think what we need to be doing in the coaching market is being absolutely clear what we're doing. And when we're talking to our clients, we're saying, as a coach, this is what you can expect from me. So if you're actually working as a pure coach under ICF or EMCC guidelines, then you're saying, my job is not to give you advice or guidance. My job is to really help you find your own solution. And then have the courage to be able to say, I think it would be more valuable if either I switched roles or I changed the contract so that I can offer you some of my advice, because I think my role as a mentor would be more valuable to you. But I think it's our job to do that at the contracting stage. It's not easy because there is such a lot of confusion. I was just with a chief exec the other day who was talking about having an executive coach on his board. And I thought, that's curious. What's the executive coach doing? Oh, well, the executive coach is going out and finding out what's going on in the organization and coming back and telling me. So, well, that would not be my understanding of a coach. That's a consultant. I'll say, well, we just call them a coach. Now, that's the sort of thing that just confuses everybody. It really screws up the definitions. And I think just it'll be long, consistent, persistent talking over and over again. And what I'd like this webinar to be doing is reinstating mentoring and professional mentoring as a way of getting people to be clearer about what they do and putting some clear water between coaching and mentoring and then advising. But it's still muddy. Yep.
Super. Okay. Well, I think we will wrap that up with the question. That's a great one. Maybe one last question. If you have a coach certification, how important do you think it is to be certified with the ICF? Do executives really pay attention to this? Now, that's quite an interesting question.
My experience, but the HR buyers, so if you're going through the HR procurement process, Yeah, they definitely do, especially the sophisticated organizations that know what they're buying, and they have maybe an internal coaching cadre as well that maybe works at a lower level. If you're not accredited, you won't even get through the door. The executives themselves, they probably don't know, they don't actually care. They just need to know that you're good, you've got a good track record, you come highly recommended. That's all they care about. The HR procurers, they want to guard their backs. They want to make sure that they're getting the right people on the job. So it's not essential, but you need to. I really strongly encourage you to become accredited because it strengthens the profession and it stops the cowboys. Because once we get in place that only a good coach will be accredited, then we exclude those who are just trading with the label.
Okie doke. Thank you so much for that, John. There's a lot more questions that are coming through. I'm sorry to everyone who didn't get their questions answered. But thank you so much for today's session, John. I know that we're very much looking forward to your full session on the 22nd.
Yeah, come back on the 22nd of June and maybe I'll answer them then.
Well, there you go. That's it. Come back on the 22nd of June, yeah, because that's when John will be doing his full session, which is going to be at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, which I believe is 9 a.m. Pacific. And 5 p.m. UK time, and probably in the middle of the night across most of Asia Pacific, unfortunately. Okay, guys, so without further ado, I'm going to call this session to an end. Thank you once again to John, and we have one more session later today. Put myself on the spot and say who that is. I believe it is Mike. Bear with me 2 seconds. I'll tell you who it is. Yes, Mike Myatt. Now, Mike Myatt is an interesting guy. He actually coaches more CEOs of Fortune 100 companies than anybody else in the world. That's his claim to fame. So probably a guy that's worth listening into, especially if you're looking at getting to the larger organizations and to the top of the larger organizations in the world. Anyhow, thank you so much and for coming today, and take care everyone, and finally thanks again to John for today's session.